Oh my goodness.
You're not allowed to touch anything.
When you hit that switch, you should get power. Who's getting power? Babe, can you not? When we originally bought Agape, we felt she was ready to go cruising right then and there. She was a turnkey boat, but after living on her for 2 years, slowly but surely, our to-do list before cruising grew. It would take Agape being on the hard for 40 days and hundreds of hours before we felt like she was ready to go cruising. Step 1 on the never-ending to-do list was to pull the rig before Agape could be hauled out of the water. At this yard, you pay for crane time by the hour, so the night before, we loosened all the turnbuckles and made sure the cotter pins would slide out easily. In all, it took only 20 minutes to pull Agape's mast. At this point, I had quit my job so I could work full-time getting Agape ready to leave. After pulling the rig and hauling the boat, we were excited to get to work. With the boat out of the water and safely in her cradles, it was time to get greasy. Even though our trusty engine Mr. Perkins was running strong, he had a few minor issues. At 34 years old, we thought it best to pull him out and send him to a local shop for some work before the long voyage ahead. With the engine out, we could turn our attention towards the rig. We had our friend Ian Weedman from Port Townsend, Washington, come and do a rigging survey for us. And at the end, his recommendation was to replace the rig before we left on our journey. So we stripped the mast of all the rigging, and after measuring it 4 times with 3 different tape measures, I was satisfied with the measurements. By this time, I think Rachel and my dad were a little frustrated with me, but we couldn't afford to be wrong on our measurements. We'd be sending all of these to Port Townsend rigging to be swaged and shipped back to us.
No, don't do that. You're gonna hurt your back. Just roll it.
Who's with the legs?
No, your back.
Most of the big projects were coming along really well. Rachel would spend all day with the heat gun and scraper, and I'd be working on the hull, grinding out, filling and burying the blisters. With the old headliner down and looking a little worse for wear, Rachel and her dad cut new boards and vinyl to completely replace the old headliner. When the headliner's done, you get your back rub. Oh, now you're on video. We also enlisted Rachel's dad, Jack, to help with all the woodwork and varnishing throughout the boat. Because I wanted to run lines for our new staysail aft into the cockpit, we had to add a hole into the port side of the Traveler as well. This turned out to be a much larger project than I thought it would be. But with my dad's help and advice, we got through it.
Kind of solid here and then just cutting the tabs.
We also filled in all the old hardware holes, as well as reinforced the Traveler and cut out some rot on the starboard side. I think it actually turned out pretty good.
Week 3, and the boat is still a disaster, but the new headliner is up, most of it. And if we head outside, the Traveler is done, almost done. Cheek decks, almost done. First coat of non-skid on.
With our time on the hard coming to an end, it was time to turn back to the bottom. And one of my favorite things to do, sand. This time it was sanding bottom paint, and since it's toxic, I spent a lot of time in Tyvek with a respirator. All the old blisters have been ground out and filled with epoxy and are awaiting barrier coat and bottom paint.
Hi. You're so cute.
It's kind of fun. It's like meditation. Really loud meditation.
My dad Jeff is a champion and helped us with everything, from sanding, cutting, grinding, painting. He was there for almost every one of the projects. We took full advantage of his lifetime of knowledge, working, owning, and cruising on boats. The last thing to do before Agape was ready to splash was reinstall the engine. This should have been fairly straightforward, but with some electrical issues, it ended up taking a little longer than I thought. But eventually, she was ready to go. With Agape back in the water and the engine running, it was time to put the new rigging up. The finish line was now in sight. Putting up the rig was not hard, it was just the moment of truth. Either I had measured it correctly 4 times and it would fit, or it wouldn't. I couldn't tell you what a relief it was when the last pin slid in. We still have a local rigger come and double check our work and help us to tune the rigging. And just like that, it was time to take Agape back home. This wasn't the end of our to-do list, but the end of our 40 days on the hard. All the big stuff was now behind us. We had done a ton of work and were so stoked to have the boat back home. We learned so much during our time on the hard, and I'd highly recommend to anyone thinking about long-distance voyaging to do the work themselves. Not only do you learn about the boat, you gain the confidence to undertake future projects. And this is invaluable, because when you're really out there, you only have yourself to depend on.